Hi there, friends. Linda Stern again from the Stern Family Art Collection. Today, we are going to look at another slightly more modernist painting by an artist named Frank Myers, who lived from 1899, where he was born in Ohio, until 1956, and he died in Pacific Grove, California. Here's John from our home office to tell you a little bit more about Frank Myers and this very interesting painting.
Thank you, Linda. The painting is called Painting Class, Provincetown. It's in Massachusetts. It was painted by Frank Myers. It's a good-sized painting, 25 inches by 30 inches. And it was painted sometime about 1922, 1925. Frank Myers started out as a very realistic artist. He was born in Ohio, and he studied in his early days. When he was about 18 years old, he enrolled at the Cincinnati Art Academy, which was closest to his hometown of Cleves, Ohio. And then he continues his studies 1919 and 1920 at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philadelphia. So he got some good academic training. Those are both very good schools. In 1921, he spent most of the year in France. He was there with one of his teachers, and they were painting throughout the Normandy and Paris and Brittany. In 1922, he returned to the United States and got a job as a teacher at the Cincinnati Art Academy, which he was there for 23 years, so he had a long career as a teacher as well. And also, he is also noted for some of his paintings of Taos and Santa Fe. When he was in Taos in the late 20s and early 30s, he was a good friend of Joseph Henry Sharp. So this painting is a somewhat transitional painting from being a modern painting, and you can see that particularly in the background, where all the shapes are flat. It's quite angular, and the colors and the shapes are simplified. In the foreground, where you see the three ladies, there is a close attention to creating volume and creating three-dimensional space. So there's a little bit of everything in it. Once he became a professional artist, he was very much a modernist. Was into dynamic symmetry, the system where you create a perfect composition, supposedly, by using geometry. So a lot of lines, you can see a lot of lines in his paintings. And it also had to do with structuring in a mathematical way. But he did that for a little while. And then he also painted in a very almost cubist-like manner. But by the time this was painted, he was in between. He was painting modernist and he was painting realist paintings. So he in the late 30s, he was developing serious health issues. So the family decided to move to Pacific Grove near Monterey. That was done in 1940. And he became a very serious painter of Monterey. A lot of seascapes, but also some wharf scene and fisherman scenes. A good friend of Armin Hansen, so they painted together a lot. In 1956, he died at the age of 55 from a heart attack. So that ended his career. His paintings can be seen at the Smithsonian Institution. It's a scene of urban scene of Ohio in the snow, and also the Museum of New Mexico, because he had a very good relationship with some of the New Mexican painters. And of course, in Cincinnati, the University of Cincinnati has several of his museums. Several of his paintings. So I got to know the family in the early 1970s while I was in San Diego working at the San Diego Museum. I met the son and his wife. The son was also named Frank, and the wife was named Patricia, Pat. And we borrowed some paintings for the San Diego Museum. But then also when I became employed by the Irvine Museum, we continued our relationship, borrowed paintings. I helped Pat. She got divorced from the son, and in the settlement, the son decided that she would be a much better steward for the estate. So she got to take care of the Frank Myers estate, and she did a very good job. She and her son Brian made a big point of letting people know that he existed, that he was a good painter. She did a lot of lectures. There were a lot of paintings that were borrowed for various shows. And I was a good friend of Brian and Patricia for many years. Patricia eventually moved back to Seattle or Pacific Northwest, and she died there in 2003. But in her will, and she did this with her son Brian, they left the estate to the Irvine Museum. So the Irvine Museum is the largest depository of paintings by Frank Myers.
Very interesting, John. I notice in this painting that a lot of the brush strokes are what you would see from a traditional sort of impressionist painting, sort of quick brush strokes where you back up and see the detail and close up. They're just lots of brush strokes and lots of color, and shadows and things. But like you say, it's flat looking, which would be kind of a later period as you're going from Impressionism to Modernism.
Well, there's both of that in there. It's a good observation. The background, the brush strokes are rather flat and applied in a smooth, large motion. The foreground with the three ladies, there's a lot of detail. There's a lot of small brush strokes. There's a lot of light. Colors blended together create the sense of the bright sunlight. As a good friend of ours says, there is no tube called sunshine, so you have to use colors to create the effect of sunshine, and it is very, very well done in this painting. Again, Provincetown was an art center on the East Coast, and there was a school there, the Cape Cod School of Art, that was run by Charles Webster Hawthorne, and it became a very popular place for both art students but also painters who would just go there and paint. This is an art class. We don't know who the teacher is, but we see there's three women, so mostly women, and it's probably just as a moderate to light instruction where artists are taught to paint and they're left to create whatever they do.
Well, those bright colors really add to the sunlight effect. And you can see that on the women's clothing, where you see kind of light and shadows on the hat, on the striped dress, and those bright yellows and oranges with that sort of blue turquoise of the boat right above it. Strong opposites give you a much stronger color, feel of light when you place those opposites near each other like that.
That's good, that's right. As you enter the painting, there's a big diagonal, and there's another diagonal with the heads of the women, so it brings you into the painting this way. And as you come around, you see some activity going on, but the more you look and the farther back, the more flat, the more sketchy. Here's a group of houses, and it's barely done, but they're not important. The important part is the foreground, and that's where all the light is, that's where all the color is, and how you enter the painting, and you see one figure, you see the other, and then you go into the background. So again, this has a little bit of each, a little bit of Impressionism and in the background, a little bit of Modernism. One
of the things I especially like in this painting is it's it's a painting of painters, painting on plein air. And it's an amazing fascination. We go to a lot of plein air events, and we know a lot of plein air artists. And I have to say, they're often painting each other painting. We see a lot of paintings at these events of other artists painting outside. It's kind of a fascination they have.
Well, I think a lot of it is they go outdoors and they can either paint the landscape, which is beautiful, but there's not much going on, or they can paint the other painters that are there with them. So you do see that a lot. And it makes it, to my mind, it makes the painting a little more interesting, but it kind of negates the idea of being outdoors. You're outdoors to paint the light, and the light creates the colors, and the colors are found in the landscape. So it's an interesting observation, and you get a little bit of both when you attend these events.
Certainly. Oh, and this wall just happens to have the John Stern Lifetime Achievement Award of the Plein Air Convention from 2014. A very proud day indeed for Monsieur Stern.
This is it right here. Later in one of our programs, we're going to talk about this painting. This is a miniature by William Wendt. So if you saw the show about the 3 Edgar Paint miniatures, we have another famous artist, a William Wendt miniature. Then we have a couple more miniatures, which we will talk about. So please stay tuned.
There'll be more. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed this version of Art with the Sterns. See you again.